Tell us about the teams that we're going to see come to New Zealand, Martin.
There's 20 teams in this competition. 12 of them automatically qualified out of the last World Cup. But then there's been a qualifying series happening right around the world for the other teams. So over the last couple of years, we've been watching that closely just to see who qualified. So you get all the big teams that you expect, the New Zealand, South Africa, France, England, those sort of teams. But then you're starting to see teams qualify like Russia. Russia have never qualified for the Rugby World Cup before. The USA, Japan, Georgia. Georgia and Russia, those two countries close to each other. A fair bit of conflict there. So when they played off against each other to qualify for Rugby World Cup, they couldn't have home and away matches. They actually had to play in neutral venues in Turkey. So that was a beaut. So there are going to be teams that New Zealanders know nothing about here, but we're going to take them to our hearts. And what we're doing is we're spreading the games and the teams far and wide around New Zealand. So we're using 13 match venues. It would have been a hell of a lot easier for us to use 8 or 9 from an operational point of view and even a financial point of view. But our feel from the start of this project is we had to send a very clear signal to Kiwis that this is a nationwide tournament. So instead of just using 8 or 9, we're using 13 venues, which means that when you put up a map of New Zealand and you put dots on where the matches are going, including the normal places, you're also putting dots on places like Whangarei, on Nelson, Invercargill. So it really starts to show visually that the whole of New Zealand's involved. And then when we decided where the teams were going to go and stay during the tournament, in addition to those 13 places, we threw in another 10 places on top of that. So small communities like Ashburton, Masterton, Wanganui, Gisborne, Kerikeri, suddenly they're all involved. They're asked to look after teams for a period of time, and because they're given that responsibility, it galvanises those populations, and suddenly the whole nation, is starting to really get hyped up about this thing. That's fantastic from our point of view.
Yeah. Ticketing, of course, is going to be a huge undertaking for New Zealand, Martin. Tell us a bit about that.
New Zealand is paying for the whole cost of running this tournament, and the cost of that is something over 300 million bucks. And the only revenue we get is from ticket sales. So we don't get anything from sponsorship, nothing from television, nothing from merchandising. We rely, in order to offset that cost, we rely on ticket sales. We're budgeting at 269 million, I think, from ticket sales. Now, just put that in a bit of perspective. The biggest grossing event in the history of New Zealand prior to this was the Lions Tour 5 years ago, when on the back of, I think it was about 11 fully sold out matches, the New Zealand Rugby Union grossed 24 million bucks. So we're having to do about 11 times that. And if we manage that, the tournament will still be running at a loss, 39 million bucks loss. So it's critical that the ticket programs goes well. So we've got 1.5 million tickets to sell. We're phasing tickets, the sales process, over about a 12-month period. We had a first phase halfway through the year. We sold 500,000 tickets, so we're absolutely thrilled about that. We're into a second phase at the moment, and that'll carry on through into Christmas. And then there'll be stuff happening next year as well. At the same time, there's a commercial program running where there are travel agents all over the world that are selling packages into Rugby World Cup. And likewise, those people that are in charge of selling the hospitality packages in the stadia and around the stadia on match day are also selling packages which include tickets that they purchase from us. So it's a big operation. It started really well, but we've got a long, long way to go on this one.
I hear there's also a festival, Martin, being organised around the Rugby World Cup. Can you give us a bit of information about that? What
we decided at the start here is that we needed to get the whole of New Zealand in behind us for this. And whilst we had sold our bid to the International Rugby Board on the basis that New Zealand is a stadium of 4 million rugby nuts, the reality here is that there's probably about 2/3 New Zealanders who are interested in rugby, but there's another third that aren't interested. In fact, some of them, I think, actively dislike it. We had to make a decision at that stage. Are we just going to go with the 2/3, or do we want the whole of New Zealand to be involved in this? So obviously we went for the second one. Now then it was a matter of thinking, okay, how do we actually capture the interest of those people who don't give a toss about rugby? So the idea of a festival grew, and so we took that out to the regions and said, hey, we'd love to bring the rugby to you, but actually, because of the high profile of this event, each of your communities that's involved in Rugby World Cup has a great opportunity here on the world stage to showcase yourselves. So why don't you look at each of you pulling together a festival program around the slice of Rugby World Cup when it comes to your city or town? And they love that idea. So for the last year or two, all those communities have been working on their regional festival programs, just piecing together whatever they think will make them look good come Rugby World Cup time. And now what's happened is there's an office that the government has created, sort of a sister office with us, called NZ211, and their job is to pull together the threads of all of those regional festivals and turn it into a nationwide festival that we can recognise, but also that we can tell the world about to further interest people into coming here. So, you know, that's coming along brilliantly, and that is going to make sure that in between the games of rugby that this whole thing keeps humming.
Are we going to have enough beds, Martin, for everybody here in New Zealand?
Yeah, well, it is a bit of a challenge, I have to say, accommodation. It sort of falls into two areas. It's about, have we got the capacity? And then secondly, there's a pricing issue too that we're having to work our way through. So in terms of numbers of beds, it's not so bad during the pool phase. When you've got 20 teams here, they're spread right through New Zealand, then we'll have plenty of beds, I have a feeling. You know, this is not peak tourism season, and the numbers that are coming for Rugby World Cup, whilst they're really concentrated and it's great for Rugby World Cup, they don't hit the same sort of figures that we get in February, say, when it's the peak of the tourism season. So I think during September, during the pool phase, that'll be fine. When we get to the knockout stage of the tournament, when everything sort of concertinas into Wellington and Christchurch for the quarterfinals, and then moves on to Auckland for the final, we have got a bit of a challenge then. We haven't got enough top quality beds. We haven't got enough hotels, if you like, at that stage. So for the last 2 years, we've been pulling together all sorts of different solutions to this. We've got 3 cruise ships coming in for the quarterfinals onwards. So when the quarters are being played here in this stadium in Wellington, across the road in the water, just there'll be 2 cruise ships. About 2,000 Rugby World Cup fans on both of them. And then at the end of the quarters, they'll get on the water and they'll get their way up to Auckland for the semis, hopping their way up into various ports on the way. Then after the semis there, they get on the water again and get back into Auckland for the final. Same thing in Christchurch. In Littleton, there'll be a cruise ship there for their quarters, and then they'll hop their way up. You imagine being on a ship with 2,000 other Rugby World Cup fans. Be pretty quiet, I'd imagine. And then we've got to make sure that overseas visitors understand that in addition to hotels, there's a whole lot of other layers in New Zealand, like motels. Motels aren't really well understood offshore, so we're really trying to get that message out there that they're a good option. Then you've got your B&Bs, your lodges and whatnot. Then there's a whole lot of entrepreneurial people that are starting to think, well, I could move out of my home and perhaps rent my home. So there's a few businesses popping up that are offering private homes. And I think something that right at the end of this that's going to come to the fore is private home hosting. I think there's a lot of people around who will think, okay, I've got a spare bedroom here. I'd quite like to have someone who's a visitor here for Rugby World Cup come and stay with me just for a couple of nights. And you imagine what that sort of flavour that creates around the tournament if the hosts and the visitors just spending a couple of days with each other and enjoying each other's company. And that's happening all over New Zealand. I think that'd be something really special. If all of those options fail, then the Prime Minister came up with the absolute stunner that will kill it dead, and that's topping and tailing. So you know, we'll save that one up perhaps for the end, and if we need it, we might have to pull it out. But hopefully the other options we're putting in place will be fine. Yeah, it does. I'll tell you what it does do though. It's not just accommodation; it's transport as well. That there's going to be a bit of pressure here. So there's a whole lot of work going on with the airlines that are bringing people into New Zealand, and of course getting people up and down the country to make sure that they really understand the environment that we're walking into here. We're dealing with the rail, the motorhome companies, the rental car companies. So there's a whole host of that transport work that's going on alongside the accommodation work, just to make sure that you know, the average visitor gets here, they can have a decent bed to sleep in, they can get around the country, and that just means they don't have to worry about those things, and they can concentrate on the rugby, on the festival, and just having good fun.
So what are some of the key things, Martin, that are going to really make this work for New Zealand?
Well, I think the first thing is everyone is going to have to lift their performance to a much higher level than maybe they're used to in business as usual. And that's been one of the challenges we've taken on over the last 2 years, is just lifting our own performance and also helping others to do that as well. So that's an absolute key, and then you'll get people to a level of performance that hopefully then becomes business as usual going forward. So that'll be a nice legacy. Then there's the volunteers. The volunteers, you guys know what volunteers are about. You've got a lot of volunteers in your organisation. You know how valuable they are. We've got a volunteer force that we're using. We'll probably be about 5,000, 6,000 or so Kiwis working on this, and they will be critical to making this work. They're the way in which they are the people that interface with the visitors and create the first impressions. So they're absolutely essential. In the end though, I think that the most key ingredient to the success of this will be the nature of the hosting experience that we provide for the visitors. We have to ensure that our desire for the All Blacks to win this Rugby World Cup does not become a block to us making sure that the hosting experience for all these visitors is something so special. So we're really asking the whole of New Zealand, your organisation, your members, organisations all over New Zealand, Kiwis all over New Zealand, to be ready to give our visitors the best possible time they can have when they're in New Zealand.
Martin, just to finish, on behalf of the New Zealand Fire Service, can I thank you very, very much for your time and your contribution. It's been absolutely fantastic talking with you, and I hope our conference delegates have got a lot out of that. So thank you very, very much again.
And thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. And one last final question from me, Martin. So who's your pick for winning the World Cup next year?
Oh, I don't know. There's 20 teams here. Obviously the big teams, you know, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, France, England. They're all in with a chance. Too close to call maybe, I don't know. I'll think about that one.
Maybe I could give you a hint.
But Martin, the Irish, we're definitely worth a punt, aren't we? And remember Munster, 1978, and we've just given it to the Aussies. Brian O'Driscoll, he's the man, he's got the magic. Can't we discuss this over a couple of pints of Guinness?